This is Talk of New England. With Barbara Anderson and Jim Braude on New England Cable News.
Welcome to Talk of New England. I'm Barbara Anderson.
And I'm Jim Braude.
One more day to go. We'll talk about the presidential candidates, New England congressional races, the governor's campaign, and the Senate race in New Hampshire, and local legislative races. At the end of the show, we'll also take a stab at predicting the outcome of some of the hotter races, or at least choose our favorites, and try to guess how people will vote on the 3 ballot questions.
Are we going to be on for a couple of months to do this, by the way?
Talk fast.
Incidentally, that's 4 ballot questions. We're going to return to Team's question 2, later in the show, and explain to you why it does matter that you vote. Our guests tonight are the Republican leader in the Massachusetts State Senate, David Locke, and Barbara Gray, a Democrat from Framingham. They'll also talk about what's likely to happen in the state legislature, as well as where they think federal races will end up. Barbara, speaking of where federal races will end up, on our first show, I guess 6 or 7 weeks ago, we talked about the potential for one-party rule in Washington. That seems to be days away, meaning all Democratic control. We seem to be days away in Massachusetts from a House and a Senate that have the ability to override Bill Weld's veto. 1, is it going to happen? And 2, does any of the people in the state, do they care that they're about to give control to the Democrats on both fronts?
Is it too late to get a residency visa for New Zealand?
I don't think so.
New Guinea, I think, is about as
Actually,
far
I know
away
a
as
lot
you
of
can
people
get.
would be
Still
willing to
have
get
indoor
you.
plumbing?
You think so? My sense is it's clearly going to happen on the federal level, despite the fact that the numbers are tightening up. I think virtually everybody agrees the electoral college is over.
You shouldn't look so pleased, Jim. I mean, then your party is going to take total responsibility for everything that goes right and everything that goes wrong.
That's absolutely right. And
they won't have anyone to blame. They won't be able to look at
That's exactly right. That's the way it should be. Dan Quayle, who you know I respect very deeply, was the one who convinced me. This was right when Dan Quayle said on several shows, if you're going to have a Democratic Congress, which you clearly are, if you're going to have a Democratic Congress, then give the election to Bill Clinton so that we can give one party control for 4 years and see if they can do it. That's what the public seems to be doing. But the issue that I'm concerned about is I'm not sure that matters to the average voter. I'm not sure that he or she doesn't vote on the merits of that particular individual, and then what's just going to happen is this
Democratic. It depends on what kind of a memory they have. We do have a visual, and I'm not sure how quickly we can get it up on the screen, of one of the pieces of campaign literature that is being used by the Republicans. But I think we'll have it later on in the show to show people what exactly it might look like if we have a full Democratic victory. Don't forget, ever since 1941, most of the time, the House and Senate have been Democrat. The only time since 1941...
Federally or here?
Federally, yeah. That there has been a Republican President and Republican House and Senate and the Congress has been during the Eisenhower years, 2 of the Eisenhower years. So I'm not quite sure how we can blame...
Were you born then, by the way?
And I remember that I was a couple of 10, 12, 13 years old, and it was
fighting
a great
against
year.
Taxes even then, right?
And, well, it didn't have to, because it was a Republican president, Congress, and things were going very, very well. After that, you had Republican presidents, sometime Democrats, but always a Democratic Congress. Now you're going to say we're not even going to have a Republican president to veto some of the things
two interesting things.
Congress
First of all, do you know that taxes as a percentage of the gross national product were higher when Eisenhower left, much higher than they are now? That's number one. Number two, I'm not sure that anybody votes that way. If you're in a district...
That's before Bill Clinton had a chance to raise them, as he has promised to do.
Let's assume you are worried that there's going to be a Democratic president, Democratic Senate, Democratic House in Congress, and you say to yourself, but I like the Democrat whose district I sit in. Do you think someone's vote's going to switch to Republican because they want to make sure that there's not that lock in Washington?
I think possibly not in the federal races, but I think in the state races.
You vote against someone you like just so that Weld doesn't lose his veto?
Oh, yeah.
You really think so?
Oh, I think people recognize that in order for this state to get back on firm track again, that they have to have an ability to sustain, that even really nice Democrats, good Democrats, have to have somebody that they can point to say, I would love to vote for more spending the way we Democrats do, but because Weld has his veto, I can't. I think they were very glad to have that excuse over the last couple of years, and I think a lot of people, especially the independents, are going to vote to make sure Weld can sustain that veto, and the Democrats always have an excuse to say no to the special interest groups.
Well, actually, it's sort of funny. There was a column in, I think, Saturday's Globe, Bob Jordan, talking about how maybe the Democrats don't want to have that veto-proof Senate, because then, essentially, to quote Bob Jordan, Bill Bulger becomes governor in the eyes of the people in the Commonwealth, and Bill Weld has somebody to run against. My sense is it is very healthy to have an overwhelming Democratic legislature in Massachusetts. It's very healthy to have one party rule.
It certainly was healthy in the 80s. I remember those healthy Dukakis.
Yeah, we actually had adequate money for education and health care and all the things that are being defunded by this government.
Now you're saying it was adequate, Jim. Back then you were saying it's not enough. You people were always up there complaining that there was. You always wanted more. When you have a full Democratic president or governor and Congress or legislature, then you get all the money you want.
Barbara, Bill
But what
Weld
happens
has had
to
his
the economy?
protection. Let's talk
Look what
about
it did to
let's talk
state.
about the economy. Bill Weld has had his protection in the Senate. Last year, at his direction, this legislature went along $200 million in tax breaks for big business. Can you tell me how many jobs that created in Massachusetts? How well did Bill Weld fix the economy? Jobs are continuing to leave the state. Essentially, trickle-down economics didn't work, and Washington didn't work for Bill Weld.
You can't blame the Reagan years for what's going wrong in Washington now, and the way you're going to blame it for the next couple of years, even if Clinton wins, and at the same time say that it wasn't Dukakis who created the problem that Bill Weld has had to deal with over the last couple of years.
That was Ronald Reagan.
Either we're going to go back a couple of years and blame previous administrations, as Republicans can still blame, I think, Billy, what's his name?
What's his name, Billy Carter?
Billy Carter.
Except he wasn't president.
His
I know
brother
what
was
you mean.
Billy. But I mean, they tend to blame Carter for the
Jimmy
first
Carter.
3 or 4 years of the Reagan
Yeah.
problems, and then, of course, Bush still had the Reagan years, the good years, to take credit for as things continued to...
Gridlock is the big word. Ross Perot says it all the time.
But Weld
People don't want
can
gridlock.
legitimately blame Dukakis for the last couple of years that he created.
Well, he has. He blames the caucus for anything.
That's
I'm
right.
sure he'll blame the caucus for the next
But the
handful
time
of years.
has come now where Bill Weld can actually make his revolution work. With those 2 years are behind us, and now it's time to start moving ahead. What he has to have to do that is the ability to sustain a veto, so that the Democrats and the Liberals have someone to point to.
Do you notice, by the way, I should
show
say, I
why.
saw virtually no Clinton-Gore bumper stickers in Massachusetts, but then when it became clear that Bill Clinton was about to become president, did you see on virtually every car in everybody's neighborhood, people are now putting up a Clinton-Gore? You know why? Because they want to be with the winner. Incidentally, speaking about opportunistic people, I got my button about a week ago, Clinton Gore. It's on a union printed thing. And I should say also, people are saying now, if you recall, just like every person I know was in the March on Washington in the 1960s, everybody was always with Clinton. They were with him in New Hampshire. They've been with him through all his Jennifer Flowers problem. They loved him all along, and they're going to love him when he's president.
But see, you have a lot of independents out there voting, and I think independents, people like me, and we still like to call ourselves independents, is that we don't like being told by the media or by anybody else that the election is over, because we haven't even been into the voting booth yet. And I think there's going to be a lot of rebellion come election day from people who were told that it's all over. And I think they're going to enjoy going in there just to fool the pundits and the pollsters.
So wait a second.
and
Someone
the,
supports Bill Clinton today because they're angry at the media for saying it's all over. They're going to vote for somebody else? What does that say about the voters?
No, I think there are still a lot of voters who don't like either of them, who are undecided how they're going to vote. I think that could be the one thing pushing them over the edge, is a resentment of being told by all the professionals exactly what the outcome of the election is when they haven't had a chance to vote
Well, let's
yet.
assume the outcome is still up for grabs. Do you think your guy has a chance? Her guy, by the way, we've talked about this before. I think on week 4 of our series here, we found out that George Herbert Walker Bush was about to get the vote of Barbara Anderson, a pivotal moment for him in Massachusetts. He's only trailing now by, I think, 21 percentage points. Does he have a chance?
Oh, not in Massachusetts,
Do you have a chance
certainly.
across the country?
But Massachusetts voted for McGovern. Across the country, yes, I think so. And I think the reason
How's it
will
do
be because there are so many people like me who didn't want to vote for George Bush, who had other candidates that they liked better. My candidate, my guy, is Ginny Kirkpatrick, if you want to know. But at the end, we're going to have to vote against the all-Democrat President Congress that we know would be a disaster for this country, because there'll be no balance of power. There'll be nobody to say no to all the people who will be surrounding Bill Clinton, telling him to say
The only
yes.
reason I'm laughing, Barbara, is let's assume people buy that notion. Let's assume they say, we want a Republican sort of counterpoint to this overwhelmingly Democratic Congress. Look how wonderfully it's worked for 4 years. Look how wonderful the country is after 4 years of George Bush. Look at the
And
wonderful
the
things he's been able to do with his
Democratic
veto. Veto Family Leave Act, which the public supports 71%. Veto unemployment extension until there was an overwhelming public furor when he finally signed it and then tried to make it his own. What exactly has George Bush done with this gridlock that's so wonderful
It's the
for the
same with
American
Bill
people?
Weld's veto. And Bill Weld has often not even had to use a veto because the Democratic leadership didn't bring the issues to the floor, knowing that even if they had the votes in the House and Senate, the governor would veto, and they don't have the
Well, maybe
votes
it's not
to
that.
override.
Maybe it's the Democrats
same
are not
thing
the
is true.
radical people you think they are. Maybe they're not the passionate pro-tax, pro-spend people that you like to paint them as, but maybe they're fiscally responsible people who believe in telling the truth. Tax when you need to, do it fairly, spend when you need to protect
I'm
jobs.
pointing to a photograph of the late 80s, when Mike Dukakis was the Democrat governor and the Democratic leadership could not stop him, and there was no balance of power in this state, and we had 5 years of deficit spending, 3 years of major tax increases, and an economy that went straight down the tube, a bond rating that was heading for the cellar. All of this because we had nothing but Democrats up there and no balance. Now we have a balance. The bond rating is back on track. It's moving up. The balance.
Wait, let's stop on bond rating. Second lowest in the United States. Wait, back on track? Second lowest in America is back on track?
It's a lot better back on track than when it was heading downward under Mike Dukakis and total Democratic
Well, Barbara,
control.
let's talk about some issues you care about.
Surely, Jim,
let's talk about what you care about.
We're better off now than we were with Mike Dukakis.
Yeah, you're right. 2 years of Bill Weld promising he's going to increase local aid by $1 billion. He cut it by $250 million in year one, level funded it in year two. This is better off. Cities and towns are better off under Bill Weld than they were under Mike Dukakis.
We're correcting for the Dukakis years, just as you and all the Clinton supporters are going to be saying for 2 years, gee, we just had to correct for the Bush years. That's why they're not going to address the deficit. That's why they're not even talking about the deficit anymore, because they're afraid they're going to win and they don't want to have to deal with it.
Tell it to people that don't have enough cops in their neighborhoods, where fire stations are closing. Some communities, they can't even buy fire insurance because there's so few firefighters. What has Bill Weld done that's so wonderful?
$1 billion. It's going to go up $1.5 billion by the end of the year. How much more do you want? And if you want it, go running to Washington, because I'm sure Bill Clinton will be happy to give it to you.
You think so?
Well, we'll see, won't we?
Bill Clinton's going to be taxing all those middle-class people, all those poor people.
That's
He's been lying for this whole campaign.
He's going to tax payroll taxes. Who do you think gets hurt with a payroll tax?
What's he going to tax the payroll tax for?
Regardless of what he's going to tax it for, he is going to raise taxes.
People over $200,000.
We're already working through May to pay our taxes.
People over $200,000, foreign corporations. Don't you think it's wonderful that the people are still voting for Bill Clinton when he's willing to stand up and tell the truth and say, I need to raise taxes to invest in the things you care about?
Every time they raise taxes $1 in Washington, D.C., they spend $1.83. Once they have that money in their hand, it doesn't go to reduce the deficit. It goes for new programs, no spending. And while I personally like Bill Clinton, I just don't think he's tough enough to say no to the likes of you, Jim.
So if that's the case,
there are a lot of people like you in Washington, D.C.
Let me be clear. We got to vote for George Bush so we can keep that gridlock on there. We got to vote for Bill Weld. We got to vote for Republicans in the Senate to make sure that Bill Weld can continue to do nothing in Massachusetts, and that's good for the economy. That's good for our future. Is that what we're saying?
What you call gridlock, some people call it balance of power, and our founding fathers thought that was a good thing.
Yeah. Well, this, as I said before, Clinton Gore, I want to make clear again, I've had this on my car for weeks and weeks and weeks. Isn't that true?
I have a Paul Rabchinuk and a Peter Torkelson bumper sticker on my car.
I have a no on 3 from 1990, a yes on 2 from 1992.
I have a preserve and protect Proposition 2.5.
I have to be pretty honest, I didn't have this on when he was in New Hampshire. I can't tell a lie. It wasn't there.
The Socialist Workers' Party, that was your candidate.
No, I don't think it was. Jim Boren from the Apathy Party we talked about last week.
Yeah,
he's not going to steal for the first 2 years. I think it's a wonderful platform. We have Lyndon LaRouche from jail saying, quote, it's a terrible inconvenience. Those are his words, not mine, running from jail. And it is a real serious problem. But the reality is we are 2 days away. The reality is we're going to have Bill Clinton. The reality is we're going to have an overwhelmingly Democratic legislature in Massachusetts. And if it turns out they don't behave responsibly over the next 2 years in this state, 4 years in Washington, and even I believe you should throw all those bums out and give it to the Republicans. But my guess is you're going to find a new era, a very happy populace with these Democratic leaders. That's what I think, Barbara.
I'm not sure we're going to find our way back if what you say is going to happen, Jim, but maybe it's worth finding out.
Get your Clinton Gore bumper sticker. We'll be back with Senator Locke and Representative Gray in just 2 minutes. Stay with us.
Welcome back to Talk of New England. I'm Barbara Anderson.
I'm still Jim Braude.
And we have our guest here. I'm going to start by introducing one of my favorite people in the whole world.
Is that me?
I already... No.
Fine.
Excuse me, Jim. Sit back while I introduce Senator David Locke, who received Citizens for Limited Taxation's Taxpayers Champion Award this year, has been a loyal friend of the taxpayer in his district and throughout the state for...
Yes, I'm only laughing because it's a hell of an endorsement. He's running 2 days from now, but continue. I'm sorry.
Well, hey, I might as well. You think I'm nonpartisan here? You think I don't care if he wins? This is a guy who, if he doesn't win the entire wealth revolution, well... Before I tell you,
do you mind if I introduce the other guest
first? First, you introduce, yes.
This is Representative Barbara Gray from Framingham, a Democrat from Framingham, I should say, and I think we should let them in on the secret, who's a Republican for her first 9 terms. Now in your 10th term, am I right?
That's correct.
And a Democrat this time, finally made the right choice.
I lost my Republican primary, but my Democratic friends wrote me in, and I'm sorry, David, but you've lost me.
It's never too late.
You can always come home, Barbara.
Welcome to both of you.
In the last couple of shows, Jim has this little game he likes to play with our viewers. He asks a quiz and lets them try to come up with the answer, and he promises them great prizes. You know how liberals will promise things?
I do.
Yeah, and he never has
always
a prize
with somebody else's
so
money,
there's no
though.
prize in this. I do have a little quiz, though, but this time I'm going to reverse it a bit. This is a quiz for Jim Braude. And I'm going to give you a quote.
Oh, great.
And see if you can guess who said this.
Okay, I'm ready.
I think we're going to have it on the screen. Okay?
It's pretty exciting, I should say, Barbara.
See if you can guess who said it.
I'm waiting.
And then I'll think of a
I think I can
prize
get
for
it.
you.
I'm pretty good at these sort of things.
If 2 seats switch hands on Election Day, the Weld revolution is over, period.
I'll tell you the truth. That's a fabulous quote. I totally agree with that. I have absolutely no idea who said it. Who said that, Barbara?
Senator Locke, I think, do you know who said that?
I do know who said
that?
In fact, I use it. Somebody named Jim Braude, head
No.
of a team, a group that loves every tax they ever saw.
A very wise guy, I should say, by the way.
He's a wise guy.
Can I ask you a question about that quote?
He answered the question.
He did. He won
Let's
some
ask
sort of
him
prize.
if he agrees with it.
What about it?
I think there's a lot of truth to it, and I quote it everywhere I go, Jim. I think you said it better than anybody else, and
Very
that's what
kind.
this campaign is all about. Are we going to lose the veto, or are we going to keep it?
Can I ask you a question? I understand the concept, but I have to ask you. I've heard Bill Weld use my quote actually on the show. I've heard you've done it in speeches. Is this because you guys have done a poll to prove that I'm the least popular person in Massachusetts?
No. You're one of my best. I admire you tremendously.
Fine, okay,
so
we'll be clear.
I use it only because I think you said it better than anybody else. I don't know how to improve on it.
So you vote for Republicans, even if you like your Democratic state Senate candidate, you vote for Republicans to make sure you protect Bill Weld's
Well, if you
veto.
want
Is
to
that
save
it?
Massachusetts, you do. Yeah. Now, if you don't care, if you just want more Democrats up there grazing in the pastures, more lambs for Billy Bulger's flock of sheep, then you send another Democrat. But
Representative, what do you
I
think?
would have to respectfully disagree with my colleague, David. I think we've had closed government for the past 2 years. I think we've had government by the governor because he has the veto in the Senate. He's sure of that. And so the government has been run really by 3 people, perhaps with yourself, certainly not with most of us. It's been a situation where the higher-ups, the governor, the Senate president, and the speaker try to resolve things because they know if it's not resolved that the governor has the veto. And so we've had a very unusual situation where there has not been the openness that I would like to see.
Barbara, look at the results. We've balanced 3 budgets in a row.
That's right.
We've done it without raising taxes. We've taken on no new borrowing, and we've reduced taxes 4 times in 2 years. Now, that's what's happened.
There's more to government than balancing the budget, which I applaud,
Well, listen,
and the
your
bond
team,
rating
your
also,
team-
which I applaud. But there are many people that are still hurting desperately in this Commonwealth. And if the governor maintains his veto in the Senate, I think you're still going to see those people hurting. And I know I care about those people out there that want jobs, that can't get them, people on public assistance that are losing their child care, their health care, and cannot get off public assistance.
Senator, let me ask you a question.
What a great phrase that is. There's more to government than balancing the budget.
There
Absolutely.
is more to it.
It's also a
Government
question-
is there to serve the people who need it most.
Let's talk
No
about
matter
one thing. Let's
how
talk about one
unbalanced
thing.
the budget gets.
Well, let's talk about one thing that everybody seems to care about, and you've always been a champion of, Senator Locke. We talked during the opening segment about local aid. Bill Weld runs supporting a ballot question that would increase local aid roughly $1 billion. Comes into office, proposes a cut of roughly $300 million. You vote for it. Second year comes back, level funds local aid. What kind of a balanced budget is it that basically says to cities and towns, this relationship we built over a decade, this revenue sharing we've done has got to stop. You're out on your own. Raise property taxes if you want to, but don't come to me.
Jim, Governor Weld was elected running on a platform that he promised there would be no new taxes in his administration. The budget was $850 million out of balance.
Didn't he promise he'd raise local aid, Senator?
He's done the best he can in raising local aid. And in
Cut
fact,
it.
Hey, let him answer.
Well, wait a minute, Jim. Lots of cuts were made. If we didn't make cuts, we'd be in bankruptcy right now. Now, the Democrats have run this state almost to the edge of oblivion. Junk bond status for our bonds. You remember when Dukakis left, he said, I left you a deficit of $150 million. You can straighten that out, as he went down the front steps of the State House. It wasn't $150, it was $850 million. And if we hadn't made cuts in the next year, it would have been $2.7 billion in deficit.
So it's more important to say no to taxes, absolutely no to taxes, than it is to provide money to cities and towns for cops and public education.
All you got to do is ask the people whether they want more taxes. Now, you have never seen a tax you didn't fall in love with. That's a fact.
If you ask the people, David, whether they want new taxes, they will say how much and why and for what purpose.
Not the people I'm talking to, Barbara. That isn't what
People
they
that
say.
I'm
How
talking
much?
to, and polls, David, show that people are willing to support increased taxes for public education for one, and for public safety for two. Those 2 areas have been suffering very badly, and if we don't do
Well, then
something...
why hasn't your party enacted it, Barbara? You're running both houses of the legislature.
Yes,
You've got overwhelming control
but
of
you
both the
have
House
the
and
veto,
Senate.
David. You and the governor have the veto.
Well, I think that is the thing that people have to recognize. If people really do want higher taxes, a 20% increase in the sales tax, that's being proposed, a higher income tax. We now have the highest income tax in the country, 126% above the national national average, but that's not enough, is it, Representative and Jim? We also had the 6th highest per capita tax burden, but that's not enough either. So if the voters, really want higher taxes, then they know what they have to do.
Did we put this way, saying,
but if they don't want higher taxes,
it's not fair to throw out a fact that's not a fact, Barbara. The 6th highest tax burden we did last week, and as a percentage of income,
in the country, fine.
As a percentage of income, 43rd in the nation.
And if people think that neither one of those is actually its 34th is enough, if you think that's not enough, then by all means, don't sustain the governor's veto. We'll go right back to where we were in the late 80s.
Barbara, can I ask you a
tax increase every single
year. Let's talk about that. Barbara, as a Democrat,
yes.
Democrat one term, possibly about to be another term, if it turned out yet overwhelming majorities, more than 2/3, able to override Bill Weld's veto, do the Democrats start raising taxes? Is that what their agenda is, just raising taxes the next morning?
They can't do it because the burden will be on the Democrats at that point not to overspend, to keep an eye on the budget and to balance it again.
Like it was on them in the 80s?
We don't need the governor's veto to be sustained.
For 16 years in a row, Democrats control the governor's office. You've controlled both branches of the legislature for more than 30 years.
That's very true, but it's a different state today, David. We have balance.
What is the difference?
Because Weld came in, and I applaud him, and I voted. That's right, and I voted with him, and I would do it again.
Would that have happened if Weld hadn't been elected and he didn't have the strength in the Senate to sustain a veto?
John Silver, a real profligate spender, wasn't he, Senators? Your view is that John Silver was just going to come in and spend billions of dollars more?
John Silver would have made a magnificent dictator if that's what we wanted. But unfortunately,
something like George Perot?
Well, very much the same way. A wonderful person, done a great job with Boston University, but not a man to lead a democratic government.
Forget the implications for a second. Is it going to happen? Let's start with the Senate to begin with. What do they need? That quote from that very, very clever political analyst. If 2 seats, 3 seats switch to the Democrats, is it going to happen in the Senate?
I hope it is not.
Is it going to happen?
Well, I don't know. I don't have any crystal ball.
You're in a pretty tough race, aren't you, Senator?
I'm in a tough race.
Yeah. Are you going to win?
It's not a good year to be an incumbent, but my hope is I'm going to make it.
Yes, but reasonably, people have elected you because they like you all these years. Why would they choose this year when they not only have the same reason for voting for you as they did before, but the sure knowledge that without you in there, they can override the governor's veto and we're going to have a tax increase?
Is it going to happen, Barbara?
I think it is going to happen. I think the Democrats will regain enough seats in the Senate so that Weld will not be able to have his, I'll say, stranglehold. Now, some of that strangle is good, David, and I believe some of it is not good.
Let's find out what Jack from Rosendale thinks. Jack, welcome to Talking New England. You're on with Representative Gray and Senator Locke.
Yes, I find it interesting that the representative is talking about the stranglehold and with respect to the Republicans. I said, but it's interesting that this time that the representative is a Democrat and she was Republican not too long ago. I mean, what parties does this individual represent and what focus does she have? She says she's a friend of the governor at a debate not too recently, but now she says there's a stranglehold. I mean, is this woman confused in respect to what government should go?
What's the answer, Representative?
That's a great point, Jack, because I've been wanting to ask this of Representative Gray, too. When you were a Republican,
yes.
As you know, Citizens for Limited Taxation does a rating. When you were a Republican, you voted with the taxpayers for tax cuts or against tax increases over 50% of the time. Now that you're a Democrat, just because of switching parties, you voted on our rating once. You have 11% rating with Citizens for Limited Taxation. So it's obvious that just by switching parties, your willingness to vote for or against taxes changes.
Well, basically, perhaps I did. Perhaps I voted more against taxes when I was Republican. Keep in mind that we were a small band, and I had party loyalty when I was a Republican. I have party loyalty now. I'm a Democrat, but I'm still the same person. The issues are a little bit different this year. The issues are whether or not government will work to sustain those who need it most. And I feel very strongly that in addition to the economic benefits that the Weld administration has brought us, the triple increase in our bond rating, and all of those things which I applaud and voted for and tout as something that we all did together because we needed to, I still think we need to talk about the real needs in public education and getting people off public assistance, child care, family leave, and those issues.
So for this, you support a 20% increase in the sales tax then?
I do. For education, yes, I do.
Senator, how do you feel about that tax increase?
I do not favor that. I think that when you're in a recession, the last thing in the world you do is raise taxes. Now, I think Barbara's right. We've got to look at the needs of those people who are hurting, and there are a lot of them hurting. We made tremendous cuts far more severe
hurt,
than anybody
yeah.
wanted to, and
Right.
there's no question but what people are hurting. But now we're getting government stabilized. You can't attack the economy until you get the state government under control, and we've done that. We've got to now stay the course.
Well, let's say, Senator, let's assume we stay the course, and let's assume you're reelected in a year from now. Bill Weld stands up and says the recession's over, the economy's back on track. There's a proposal that comes up to raise the sales tax a penny for public education. No more economic problems. Do you vote for it?
Well, I'd want to see it at the time, Jim. I'm not
But not
gonna
an
say
absolute
now.
no?
Oh, not an absolute no. I'm going to look at any of these things very carefully. I want more money for education.
I know you do.
I led the fight in the Senate to override Governor Wells' veto of the $186 million.
And he was
because
upset about that, wasn't he?
Well, perhaps he was.
I also heard you supported the graduated income tax constitutional amendment 20 years ago. Is that true?
I did in 1969, Jim,
This is
before you came
before I
along.
was born, I think, as a matter of fact,
Let me
Senator.
tell you what I did. And I got an amendment on that proposal 20-some-odd years ago, and nobody really caught on to it. But it would make the rate of taxation uniform regardless of the source of income. And it would eliminate that absurd feature of the Massachusetts income tax that says we tax the retired, the elderly, those living on their pensions, annuities, and savings at twice the rate we tax the person who's out in the workplace.
Is this the real David Locke we're
But to
talking
get that through, of course, you don't need to have to sustain a veto. You have to be able to get enough Republicans elected to actually push that piece of legislation through.
Absolutely.
We're far, long ways from that, I'm afraid, even this year.
So let me just be clear. A David Locke that might support a penny increase in the sales tax depending on the economy, a David Locke that supports a graduated income tax under certain circumstances. Is this the real David Locke?
Well, it's the one, it's been there all this time, Jim. It was there long before you came down the pike.
Are you thinking of joining the Tax Equity Alliance for Massachusetts?
No, I'm not joining the Tax Equity Alliance. The problem with you people, you tax everything that moves, and then you go back and tax everything that doesn't move.
We'll be back in a couple of minutes to find out if this is the real Senator David Locke and the real Representative Barbara Gray. Make sure you stay with us to find out.
Welcome back to Talk of New England. I'm Barbara Anderson. This is Jim Braude.
I am.
And these are our guests.
They are Representative Barbara Gray and Senator David Locke.
And this is a campaign ad that Senator David Locke has been using. I hope you can see this. It says, "Meet Senator David Locke's real opponent." And it is a photograph. I'm sure you recognize the charming face of Senate President William Bulger.
Star of 60 Minutes. I
Now,
believe, correct?
why does your ad say that David Locke is your real opponent, Senator Locke?
I think
Bill Bulger is your real opponent.
I'm sorry, what did I say?
David Locke. Maybe David Locke is his real opponent. That's another issue.
Oh, please.
Yes.
I think
Too
that
much
the real issue in this campaign is whether or not we're going to sustain the veto in the Senate. And so I have seen fit to indicate in my ads, that ad particularly that Barbara mentions, that I think the real opponent here is not the one running against me. It's Senate President Billy Bulger, who's controlled the Senate now longer than any president in Massachusetts history. And is he going to continue to do it? And is he going to have enough votes to override the veto?
Well, let's talk about what's wrong with it. Senator Bulger is an easy whipping boy, despite his 60 Minutes piece that praised him quite clearly. Why don't you tell us specifically what's wrong with having Bill Bulger have that kind of stranglehold over the Senate? What's wrong with this policy?
Because there then is no independent judgment exercised among the Democrats in the Senate. Now, there are a lot of Democrats, and I know them well, I've been there with all of them, that would like to vote as an example against taxes. They can't do it if he tells them no.
They did it this year.
Well, no, wait a minute. The test was shown on one of the last major veto overrides to extend the deeds excise tax. And we were able to sustain the veto. Every single Democrat voted to extend the tax. Every Republican voted to end it.
But on 2.5 votes, I think you'll agree that some of the Democrats did split ranks. I don't want to speak for Senator Bulger, but I think his position is this is not an autocracy, but a democracy, no matter how many votes there are there. It's a new day.
He may call it that, but my description is that he holds the Senate in the palm of his hand. He can win any vote he wants, and if he doesn't win the vote, then the conclusion is he really didn't want to, because it's there. That power is there all the time. He controls the destiny of every member of the Democratic Party. Everyone is a Senate
So basically
chairman.
your position is the other Democrats, besides Bill Bulger, don't have minds of their own. If they call him up on the phone, they say, what do you want me to do?
They don't
and
even,
they do it.
they don't
They don't
need
have
any
to call him up, they
telephones.
know.
This is a revelation to the people watching this show.
But is that what your position is?
They don't need telephones. They don't need smoke signals. All he has to do is wink, look at them, and
Tug on his
jump back up
earlobe,
on there.
whatever, yes.
Tom from Wakefield, you're with us on Talk in New England. What do you think about Senator Bulger, and what do you think about these issues as well?
Well, I don't know much about Senator Bulger. All I know is as bad as things are, they could get a lot worse. And I think that the election of Gore, and if they elect more Democrats in the Senate and the House, it's going to be as bad as it is now. It'll be a lot worse. So I wish Senator Locke well. However, I wish that you fellows had run a more coordinated campaign instead of waiting until the last minute here.
You fellows being the Republicans you're talking about.
Yeah, right. And it seems to me that the problem the Republicans have had is that they have let the agenda be set by the Democrats. Naturally, the Democrats control the legislature, and they've been able to, the argument is always over how much do we spend rather than where should we cut back. And I don't see any initiatives being made to cut spending, to privatize things.
Well, Tom, they don't have a majority. It's all they have is enough votes to override a veto.
I understand that, but you've got to make a stark contrast. Let the people see who's for what, rather than always just responding to the other side.
Well, let's talk about that, Tom.
You're going to lose. You're inevitably going to lose if the argument is always over how much more should we spend, and we'll just incrementally try to cut it back a little bit.
Thank you for calling.
That's a losing argument.
We got the point. Let me ask you a question. Coordinated campaigns you talking about federal as well. Are you hoping to ride in on George Bush's coattails in Massachusetts?
Well, I never have ridden on anybody's coattails so far, and whether it'll happen this time, I don't know.
What do you think of George Bush, by the way?
Oh, I'm a strong supporter of President Bush, and I don't care whether he's up or down in the polls. I think he's the best man without reservation for this country. I think it'd be tragic to dump him and take on Governor Clinton. And Clinton isn't a bad man, but he just doesn't have...
What do you think about Dan Quayle's line? You weren't here for the opening part of the show where I was quoting Dan Quayle from Meet the Press, where he said, if you're going to do a Democratic Congress, then give the presidency to Bill Clinton. Let one party have it. If they can't fix it, throw them all out. Dan Quayle, right or wrong?
Well, I
Bill Weld said he's the
agree with
best
him. What I
political
said
mind
about
in
Dan
the State House,
Quayle, no, I say he's got the best golf swing in the White House.
He probably does.
And I think he probably does.
Good reason to be vice president, I think. Barbara?
Yeah, I just am so disappointed, David, in the president. He is our president, and he has a great deal of stature for the office and the individual. But the way he's been conducting himself, and the names he's been calling Clinton and Gore bozos, and my dog Millie knows more about foreign policy than Clinton.
That
Gore.
probably is true.
No, I don't think it is true, and I don't really think you think it's true. I think they're kind of making a joke of everything, and I think the presidency is something just as being a senator or a representative. I know we don't have much public esteem, and I realize that, but I do think there should be something that goes with the office, if not with the individual.
Bertha from Oregon, if I may, you're on with us from Talking New England. Welcome from roughly 3,000 miles away. Hello? Bertha from Oregon. I've been there. Hello? Bertha, you with us? Not with us. Tom from Westfield, a little closer to home. You're with us on Talking New England with Representative Gray and Senator Locke. Hi, Tom.
And I would support a 20% increase in taxes for education, as Representative Gray has suggested. However, the circumstances would also have to include David Locke as Senate President and Bill Weld as Governor, so that I would know that 20% would go to education and not more pork to the educational bureaucracy.
Well, there's an
And I'd like to make a prediction that if the Governor loses the Senate veto, Mr. Locke will be Senate President in '94.
Wait, let me have that again. You're basically saying that if the Democrats have this overwhelming control of the legislature for 2 years, people are going to get so upset they vote the Republicans in. David Locke's the president of the Senate in '94. Is that your point?
Well, my point is I would support the increase in taxes if I knew. My first point was I would support the increase in taxes for education if I knew it would go to education.
But this governor has said, Tom, and I'm sure you've heard it, he doesn't care what it's for, how much it is. He is against any broad-based tax increase for Massachusetts, education or not. So it's almost moot talking about it unless this veto-proof Senate disappears. Isn't that true?
What is true is every tax increase that we've had has gone into this black hole of government. I don't think that any of the tax increases that the Democrats have supported over the past 10 years have gone into anything that's helped the government out at all.
We got you, Tom. Thanks for calling. Bertha, we're back to you from Oregon. Welcome to Talking New England.
Hi.
Is there a talk of the Northwest, by the way, Bertha?
The Clinton Gore.
Hi, Bertha.
And are you there?
Yeah, we're with you. I'm sorry.
Oh,
Go ahead.
Okay. I just called to talk about the Clinton-Gore campaign, and I just want to say that I really get worried when politicians want to tax for even more government programs. Once they're started, they never stop. They just grow and grow and grow. Our taxes grow. We see that now with all the programs that are going. There's never a cap put onto them. They don't ever go away.
So you voting for President Bush?
You bet I'm voting for Bush.
Because of taxes.
Pardon?
Because of taxes?
Well, not just taxes. Clinton Gore scares the hell out of me. Our economy, I think the biggest reason our economy is down is not President Bush. It's a tax and spend Democratic Congress. The economy's down because of all the regulations that's coming out of Washington, and not only the federal government, but state government, and the extremist environmentalist movement that has just put a stranglehold on this economy.
Bertha, let's ask Representative Gray, who's now a Democrat. The Democrats, too extreme on environmental policy. They're calling him Ozone Man. I think Bush is calling Gore Ozone Man. Too many taxes from Clinton and Gore and whatever else. There's too many regulations from the Democrats. Why should we vote for Clinton Gore if all this is true?
This just shows the extent of the propaganda or the line that the Republicans are putting out. And I must say that anytime you talk about Democrats, the Republicans say we're big spenders. We're likely to tax everybody. We over-regulate. And Bertha in Oregon has bought that, and I think some of the people in the country have bought it. And if, in fact, Clinton Gore get in, and if, in fact, we break the veto of Governor Weld in the Senate here in Massachusetts, the Democrats are going to have to be extremely careful and cautious that we don't overspend again. And I trust people like David to help us, and Barbara Anderson as well.
Yes, but Representative, it isn't the Republican propaganda. The reason I know that there's going to be a tax increase under Clinton is because Bill Clinton and Al Gore's book states that they're going to have a payroll tax, and they're going to have a tax increase for medical insurance, and they're going to have a tax increase for something else. So if you read their book, that's where you pick up the fact that there's going to be a tax increase. They're saying it. If you want to know how they feel about the environment, I've read Al Gore's book. That's how I know that they're environmentally nuts, not because the Republicans are saying it, because their own words in their own books and literature tell us.
Wait, they're not saying that. There is nothing in the literature of Clinton and Gore that says that they support a tax for health care. In fact, I wish they'd support a tax for health care. In fact, that's not their position at all. But that's incidentally why the Berthas of Oregon believe these things, because people pick it up and say it.
No, that is absolutely what they're going to do. And it says that they're going to have a payroll tax. It's in their literature, in that little book.
That's true, for job training. That piece is true. The health care piece is absolutely not true.
Do you support this payroll tax, Representative Gray?
Well, what I support is what Clinton and Gore are saying is that they're going to increase the taxes on the rich, the people that make $200,000 or more. I think that's fair. I really do. And they won't touch the middle class. As a matter of fact, what they're saying about the middle class is they'll cut taxes on the middle class.
Let's stop on that one issue. Senator Locke, the notion of on the federal level. Let's assume Clinton is telling the truth for the moment. Tax people making more than $200,000 a year. Good idea, bad idea?
Well, that may not be bad in itself, but that isn't what he's talking about. His tax, if you look at the amount of money he's going to raise by it, you can't do it by raising the tax.
But that piece of it you'd support. If that was the only piece on the table, you'd support it?
See the whole plan, Jim. You can't say that you're going to support one paragraph in a bill and you're going to oppose the rest. What he talks about, if I understand his proposal, it will raise taxes on everybody, and particularly on the working class.
No, that's not true, David.
Well, what does a payroll tax do? A payroll tax is on payroll, which means that there's going to be less payroll, therefore fewer jobs.
I have not heard him say the payroll tax.
How do you both feel? Let me ask you a question. We were told after George Mondale, remember that guy, Walter, see how soon we forget. Walter Mondale lost. You can't say taxes. You cannot say that word because people can't deal with it. Bill Clinton is not only saying taxes, but virtually every other line is, I'm going to tax the rich. I'm going to tax foreign corporations. Whether it's true or not true, the guy is ahead in the polls and about to win on a landslide in the Electoral College. Doesn't that signal a watershed, Senator Locke, in terms of people's willingness to deal with the truth?
Certainly they're not supporting Clinton because they want taxes.
Why are they supporting him?
They're supporting Clinton if they are, and I'm not sure his support is that strong, because they're mad at Bush because of the economy.
And the only way tax increase.
Of course. But don't think that people are supporting Clinton because they want taxes. People in America are taxed to the hilt. We have almost exceeded the ability of the average taxpayer to survive, and we've got to stop it. We've got to find better ways of doing it. Now, one thing Governor Weld has done, nobody's mentioned it, he's cut the size of the state workforce. 6,000 to 7,000 fewer people now on the state payroll than when he came into office. That had to be done.
Second lowest, by the way, second lowest now, according to a study released last week, of any of the 50 states as a percentage of number of people in the state. Doesn't that speak to the quality of service? If you have fewer people to provide it,
not necessarily.
Aren't they going to get less?
No, the liberal line is you throw money and people
David, that aren't getting government service. And
well, it used to ring when you had more people too, Barbara.
It always
rang in my
Oh, by the way, that statistic, Jim, I checked that out. One of the reasons we seem to be low in public workforce is they don't count 07s. And in this state where we have the highest welfare spending in the country, the highest welfare taxation, the money going for welfare in the country, most of our welfare services are done through 07 accounts, through contracted accounts. They don't count in this statistic showing us at the bottom. So
Under the World Revolution, you're one of the World Revolution's second deepest cuts in poor people's programs, only after Michigan. We only have a minute and a half
left. Highest welfare spending in the country, Jim. How much do you want?
Representative
Will you and Representative Gray ever have enough of our money?
Representative Gray, we're also told there's a possibility, which we haven't spoken about tonight, that enough Republican seats could be picked up in the House that this issue we're obsessed with in the Senate may be irrelevant. Is that not possible?
No, I don't believe so. I believe that the Democrats will hold on in the House. And by the way, in the House, we Democrats will go against the Speaker when we feel we should.
Of course, because he doesn't control you, Barbara. That's the difference between the House and the Senate.
Why does the Senate President
Because he controls the appointment of every
Only
committee
because
chairman.
people want him to control.
No, Barbara. Every single member of the Senate in the Democratic Party receives extra pay. They get it because the Senate presidents appointed them.
That's right.
Now, in the House, the Speaker doesn't have that power. He only has 21 appointments
Well,
or
if
something
I
like
were
that.
in the Senate as a Democrat and Senator Bulger made me a chair, I would not vote with him if I didn't feel he was right. I would not.
Be a chair very
All
long.
right, I wouldn't
Senator
be a
Paul
chair.
Harold, you'd lose funding for your community college. That would be the end of everything.
My experience has been that the people in the legislature, Democrat and Republican, generally vote what they believe their constituents want, and if they don't, they're clearly voting for something they think is right, not because Bill Bulger or Charlie Flower or anybody else tells them what to do. Do you tell the Republicans what to do?
No, I do not,
You
Jim. That's why
surely
we've
don't
had so
believe
much.
That's why Republicans vote as a block on almost every single issue, right?
Not at all, Jim. You're up there. You better start counting those votes. That isn't true. Now, it is on unimportant issues, no question about it. Issues that have no...
Vote as a block on unimportant issues.
No party line considerations. But you look at the Democrats, Billy Bulger can control every member of the Democratic Senate, and he does it when he wants to. Now, he doesn't do it on most issues. There's no question about that. And that's why I say, if he loses a vote, you can conclude he really didn't want to.
I've got a great idea. After this campaign, why don't you move to South Boston, run against Bulger directly, face to face, and see what the people of the city and state really want?
That's no fun. The real fun would be if enough Republicans were elected to make David Locke Senate President, and then Senate President Bulger, Nelson, would still be in the legislature, but he'd be sitting in the back row trying to get attention to speak, wouldn't
Since
he?
Barbara's waving, I want to wave at you two
Fun,
both.
folks?
You're both wonderful. Representative Gray, Senator Locke, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having
We'll be
us.
back with you in a couple of minutes to talk presidential politics, state politics, and anything else that moves you. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the Talk of New England. I'm Barbara Anderson.
And I'm Jim Braude. And let me tell you how we're going to try to handle the last 45 minutes. We're going to talk about key federal races in Massachusetts. Later on, we're going to talk about some incredible races in New Hampshire. We're going to move to New York for the final segment. And in that segment, also talk about the 4 ballot questions in Massachusetts. But let's start with congressional races here.
This is exciting.
It is exciting. Let's
Yes.
run down them really quickly. First congressional district, the founder of the Tax Equity Alliance for Massachusetts, John Oliver against Patrick Larkin. John at a 27-point lead, made some political mistakes. Larkin's closing. What happens?
I think Patrick Larkin's going to win, and while I'm certainly sorry that the leader of your organization, the spiritual head of the Tax Equity Alliance and the state's biggest taxer isn't going to be in Congress.
John Oliver by 10 to 15 points.
It'll be fun to have someone new. I think Patrick Larkin's going to win, but it's going to be close.
Richard Neal and Tony Ravosa.
I don't really know all that much about that race anymore, but the impression I'm getting is that Richard Neal is going to win.
We agree on something. Joe Early and Peter Blute.
Doesn't mean I like it, but...
Joe Early and Peter Blute. Joe Early cleared of all these check problems. Tight race. Peter Blute, a Republican. One of the races the Democrats are worried about. What's going to happen?
Well, he's cleared of any criminal wrongdoing in the check scandal, but I think the voters probably have had enough of Joe Early, and they're going to vote for someone new and young and dynamic who's going to represent their district.
And Barney Frank
more
against Ed
integrity.
McCormick in the 4th. There was, I thought, an incredibly offensive article in the Globe today where they said the good news is Republicans are not talking about the fact that Barney Frank had some charges about sexual preference issues a couple of years ago, same roughly a decade ago with Gary Studds and that. But then they proceed to lay every single thing out and then say it's good news the Republicans aren't talking about it. Not the most responsible journalism I've seen.
That's interesting. Even, they're always saying that people want to hear about the issues, but in fact now we know it is the media that is doing these other things, because here you have the 2 candidates who want to talk about the issues, who have not been using that kind of dirty politics, and yet still the media has to bring it up because that is what they figure sells
First
newspapers.
4 paragraphs, we agree again. It's pretty
Yes.
scary, isn't it? On to the 5th congressional district. Marty Meehan, Paul Cronin. Meehan is the one that buried Chet Atkins against Republican Paul Cronin, and I think has run for every single office in Massachusetts, and I think he's going to lose this time as well. Marty Meehan, I think, is fine.
Well, I don't see anything wrong with Paul Cronin running. He believes in putting some of his time and effort into politics instead of just being into business. But it does look like it's a tough uphill fight for Paul Cronin.
Mavroulis and Torkelson, another close one. You live in the district, don't you?
Yes, and this one I think Peter Torkelson is going to win. I saw him on television this morning against Nick Mavroulis. Nick is very defensive. Peter looks strong, and I think.
What do you think about the fact that Mavroulis took on the indictment charge directly in his commercials, said, acknowledging what everybody knows already, and you're not supposed to do this in politics, say I've been indicted, but trust me, stay with me. Bad idea, good idea.
Only thing he could do under these circumstances.
I think it was good politics.
Desperate.
I think it was a good idea. I think Mavroulis will squeak through.
Peter Torkelson is going to win.
Ed Markey versus Steve Stone, I think your favorite commercial, is that correct?
This one where they had the pigs at the trough. I thought that was a great commercial. I was planning to use a commercial very much like that against you in our next ballot campaign.
I should say she probably will. One of the gifts Barbara gave me a few years ago for Christmas, which I don't know if she talks about it or not, was a little pig. You know, see those things on the street, the little toys that go oink, oink, and then jump backwards? What I haven't told her yet is, well, I kept it on my shelf for 2 years. I just gave it to my baby last week, and she loves it. What can I tell you?
I think that's wonderful.
On to the 8th CD in Massachusetts. We have Joe Kennedy. I probably think Joe Kennedy's going to squeak by. What do you think?
I think I'm going to go with you on this one. Joe Kennedy's going to beat no opponent.
Somebody thought you were going to run against him after the first show in your little debate here, but I guess that isn't going to happen. Joe Moakley against Martin, I'm embarrassed to say, is it pronounced Conboy?
It's Conboy, and this is another one of those races where they've been getting along very well. They've been discussing just the issues. Martin Conboy is very good on issues, has some very good ideas, especially about education. But once again, the voters aren't focusing on this race because there's no sex appeal to it. They're not tearing each other apart.
And finally, Gary Studds against Dan Daly, not just Dan Daly, but Brian, correct? Didn't fit on our screen, but also an independent running there. So there's a 3-candidate race. Gary Studds, hard challenge in the primary, a lot of commercials, tough commercials. I think he survives as well. What do you think?
Oh, it's a brilliant commercial. He puts himself on the other side and attacks those politicians in Washington. He's going to stand up to them. It's hilariously funny, but it's also very effective. Considering that John Bryan and Daly are going to split the vote, the anti-Studds vote, I would think he does win.
Well, that's where we are, at least. Virginia from Lexington, you're with us on Talking New England. What do you think about all these things?
Hi.
Hi, Virginia.
As far as the presidential election,
we were
sort of leaning toward Clinton Gore, but after reading Jean Kirkpatrick's excellent column, where we could be severely tested in the Mideast, there could be terrorist attacks again, and who needs that? We really feel that President Bush is the best man in the White House. There could be a change in Russia, and if the best that Clinton can come up with is former President Jimmy Carter, we are all going to vote for the president.
Well, let me ask you, were you offended at all by Bush's comment this week that his dog, Millie, knows more about foreign policy than Clinton and Gore? Did that upset you at all? Is that presidential?
Well, the way things have been going, and where they're always calling him Bush, what happened to the term President Bush? That I have really been turned off by the Democrats. I mean, he still is the president. He could very possibly be the president for 4 more years. And a lot of things have turned me off, but we still were leaning toward Clinton Gore.
When you talk about dignity, Jim, I mean, this was the Democratic Party was the one at the convention who said that the Virgin Mary was a homeless, unwed mother. I mean, let's not talk about dignity when we're talking about presidential politics.
It's a great speech by
She's absolutely right, and that column by Jeannie Kirkpatrick was very convincing to me.
Virginia,
as well.
when did you switch, by the way? How recently did you switch back to Bush?
Well, we were thinking about it this week, and then when I read Ms. Kirkpatrick's column, and plus other people speaking, I think it was John McLaughlin on his show on C-SPAN, that we could be severely tested, and that he predicted that probably by January, Yeltsin would be out.
So essentially you are part of that shift that we're seeing in the polls back to Bush for a variety of reasons. In your case, concerned about foreign policy.
I know we're in bad trouble here, but I'd rather be in trouble in this country with the economy rather than start all that went on before. I think people have forgotten what we went through these past several months, and I really feel that the president is the best one to have in. And something I'm going to say which is going to sound terrible, but who needs another Kennedy, John Kennedy in the White House? At 30 years after his death, we're still hearing about Marilyn Monroe and the affairs, and we have really, it just came about this week, I'll tell you the truth, and that we are all going to vote for President Bush.
Well, you're part of the swing, Virginia. Thanks for joining us.
I think a lot of people are like that. I think there are a lot of people. I remember Jean Kirkpatrick, too, who used to be the ambassador to the United Nations, by the way, so she does know her foreign policy. She was very angry with Bush and wrote many columns against President Bush. I've been angry with Bush. I know a lot of people who are angry with Bush, but in this last week, like Virginia, we're realizing that particularly on foreign policy issues, just simply can't count on someone who's as untested as
Jean Kirkpatrick, by the way, the person who not only Barbara Anderson, I believe, but a lot of people would like to, Republicans or independents would like to see running for president instead of George Bush, but at least not this time. Jean from Needham, you're with us on Talking New England. Welcome. Hi, Jean.
Hello.
Hi, Jean. How are you?
I can't hear you much.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, but I'll make it out, but it's very soft. I don't know what happened. All of a sudden it clicked off.
We can hear you great, so just shoot
fine.
away.
I want to... For that lady that's just listening and others, I get every paper there is and watch every program. And Bill Sapphire, as you know, who was with the Nixon administration, is putting his vote with Clinton. And he said everything's coming apart and there's going to be very big trouble in the White House if Bush gets in. There's going to be trouble anyway because that Iraq gate is really coming apart. He's the one that originally triggered it off. But I want to bring something else.
That's why we should say for our viewers, that was a cover story in the New York Times Magazine last week.
But I want to tell you something else. I watched Ben Wattenberg, and everybody knows who he is, I'm sure. I know you do. And he said last night he's watched Clinton for 6 years. Clinton, he told us that Jesse Jackson was there. He said, he's for Jackson, but he said, I've watched him for 6 years, and he's another scoop Jackson. He said, people are going to be fooled because this man is not a tax and spend. This man is for wealth reform and all these, everything else. They said he is definitely, a lot of the liberals aren't thrilled with that, but he is not.
Jean, can I ask you a question? Have you ever voted for a Republican?
Once.
For president? Who was it, if I may ask?
Oh gosh, that was.
But I guess my question was: Have you been with Clinton? Have you been with Clinton solidly since he won the nomination? Was there anything that could have happened in between that would have moved you to Bush or Perot?
No.
Okay, fair enough.
I've turned off completely. I read every paper and watch every. And by the way, I watch McLaughlin. I watch every program. Crossfire, you name it.
Make sure you keep watching our program. That's most important. Thanks for joining us.
By the way, this is going to sound very silly. I want to ask Barbara. Can I speak to Barbara a minute?
You're speaking to her. Go ahead, Jean.
Yes. I've never done this before, and I don't know what it's like in person. Does Jim Braude look that sexy off?
Jim Braude is a happily married man.
No.
So I don't even think
I'm not
in those
interested
terms.
to me. I'm just asking how he comes across on
Jean,
TV.
I want to ask a question. Did you say that to Ben Wattenberg when you called that show yesterday? Thanks for joining us, Jean. Call again, I think, sometime soon. The sense like this woman was going to stay with Clinton. She's been with Clinton. The prior caller said, with Clinton switching back, let's find out if the shift is really happening. Stay with us in 2 minutes. We're going to talk about whether or not this is a last-minute surge it's going to put Bush in, or whether it's just empty like Dukakis's 4 years ago. Bye.
Welcome back to Talk of New England.
You're Barbara Anderson, and I'm Jim Braude.
They know that by now.
We're moving on to New Hampshire, where actually I think two of the best races in the country are happening. We'll start with the governor's race. Deborah Arnesen, Democrat, also willing to say the word taxes, even though she's talking about shifting away from the property tax and the business tax and onto the income tax, against Steve Merle, who's a no-taxer, one of the highest profile races in the country, and not only on tax policy, but I think one that's being watched virtually everywhere.
This is another one of those races where the media is absolutely determined that Deborah Arnesen's going to win, and they're saying it all over the place. The fact is, as Steve Merrill has been pointing out, having an income tax in New Hampshire does not solve the problem with the property tax. All it does is add an income tax to the property tax they have, because they have seen what has happened in other states, especially in Massachusetts, when the voters or politicians allow another tax to come in because they say they're going to cut the property tax, and then we end up with property tax, income tax, sales taxes, corporate taxes.
Barbara, I would assume
all piled on top of each other.
The legislators in New Hampshire, who are citizen legislators, a system that I think you prefer and a lot of people prefer, can honor a public mandate. Arnesen has said clearly through this campaign, 75% of that income tax increase is to go to lowering the business tax, lowering the property tax, the rest for critical investment,
Jim,
to put things back to work.
The
truth is pretty powerful in this case.
The reason they honor a public mandate and the reason they have a citizen legislature is they don't have all that much money to spend, and they have to be very careful about raising any taxes because it's all the property tax and it hurts. Once they get that income tax, they're going to have to become a professional the legislature just so they have plenty of time to spend all the money
Having
that
said
they're going to
that,
take in.
Arneson by about this much, and she immediately becomes an incredible national figure, and she well deserves it. There's a great Senate race there, too. Judd Gregg, who's presided over the loss of, I think, 60,000 jobs in New Hampshire, former governor, now the governor at least, running for Senate against Joe Rao. One of the interesting things about John Rao, pardon me, I didn't know till the other day, even though he's got a lead in the polls, he just moved to New Hampshire 6 years ago, which is a pretty interesting thing that the people say, well, that's okay. This is a state where a lot of people move in for a variety of reasons.
Mostly
Rao
because they're
seems to have a
escaping
lead.
from Massachusetts.
You've seen Judd Gregg's commercials. I've made mistakes, I've lost jobs, I've this, but it's okay because I tell the truth, so vote for me. Is that going to sell?
Judd Gregg and Steve Merrill are going to win because the people in New Hampshire aren't foolish enough to allow an income tax increase to come into their state. They've done fine without it. Once this recession is over, they're going to be fine again, and they're not going to make this mistake.
A Democratic governor, a Democratic senator, and John Sununu is never going to be let across the border again. Al from Saugus, you're with us on Talking New England. Welcome. Hi, Al.
Hi, yes. I've been asking a question for the past 6 months about Clinton.
Let's hear it.
And I haven't got the answer as far as what is his foreign policy experience. Again, if there is a problem in late January, if he is elected president, what is he going to do worldwide? Does he have the confidence of over 150 countries around the world to lead this our nation into battle again if necessary, or whatever it calls?
It's a critical and it's a legitimate question. I think I'll answer your question emphatically. The answer is none. He's got no experience. I don't think he denies it. The question is, with the kind of advisors he has, can he do the job? My position is yes. Clearly, there's no question that if you're looking for experience in foreign policy, even if you're not crazy about some of the outcomes, George Bush has a lifetime of experience, but that's not everything.
The advisors he has are the same people who didn't want to do SDI, who didn't want to have a strong foreign policy, which is what, in fact, brought about the decline of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War. Those are the advisors Clinton has. They aren't going to be there for him if he runs into an international crisis where you have to use strength and power and what weapons we have.
Well, he's a bright guy, and let me tell you, if he wants to dump the Strategic Defense Initiative of Ronald Reagan in a minute and use that money for schools and police, I'd be first in line to be doing that.
The reason there's any money now is because of SDI, we have an end of the Cold War. Now we can cut the defense budget, but we have to have that ability to protect ourselves, and a lot of the people around Clinton don't believe in protecting
Al, let me
ourselves.
ask you a question. You still with us?
Yes.
Would you vote for any candidate for president if he or she, hopefully someday, if he or she hadn't had foreign policy experience before?
I would hope that someone in their team would. I mean, a vice presidential candidate. When Reagan ran, of course, he picked Bush. Especially now, people keep thinking the world is less volatile today. It is more volatile. We don't know where the front line is. We can have a problem anywhere in the world. But the problems today are going to happen overnight.
Well, you say have it on his team. I don't understand what you mean. Gore has some foreign policy experience. Lots of Democrats have foreign policy experience. Obviously, the people that are going to replace the Colin Powells and others are people who do this kind of work for a living, even if Bill Clinton hasn't done it. That doesn't give you any confidence level at all?
Well, somebody respected around the world. I think Bush is respected. All right, yes, he's made problems at home. And listen, I'm not a big Bush fan. Matter of fact, I'm not even Republican. But I think out of the choices we have, I think we have to look at the overall picture. Yes, we're hurting at home, but we're at least breathing. Maybe barely, but we're at least breathing, and our economy is somewhat moving. I mean, we're not in a depression. We're in a lull right now, and it may take time. Maybe
Al, did you read the other day the comment that Gorbachev made in a speech or a column where he said that George Bush contacted him recently and said, don't worry, I'm going to say that I single-handedly am the one who liberated the Soviet Union. I don't really mean it. You were a partner, but I'm going to say it anyway. That's politics. Does that bother you at all?
No.
I don't think that's exactly the way the story went. But I think as a politician, and Gorbachev now has to be a politician thanks to the end of the Cold War, he would recognize that there are certain things that you take credit for when you're running for office, and no politician begrudges another politician doing that in a tough campaign.
Al from Saugus, thanks for joining us. Paul from Stoughton, you're with us on Talking New England. Welcome.
Hi. First, I'd like to say, Barbara, I think you're great. We need more people like you.
What are you going to say about me?
Well, you hurt my wallet too much.
Oh.
The only person thought you were sexy, so you were even.
Yeah, Paul, what's your question?
Well, I just wanted to make an observation. If we can go back as far as the CLT petition, that I'm going to vote for Perot, by the way.
Inside CLT petition, for those who don't remember, question 3 in 1990, pretty large tax rollback that I think lost. But in any case, Paul, yes.
The people don't have a voice anymore. By the time you get done with state, federal, police, unions, and so on, they're too large for us to even make a difference.
So you say you're voting for Perot? Is that what you just said?
Excuse me?
Did you just say, Paul, I'm sorry, that you're voting for Perot?
Yes.
Does it, incidentally, I respect that and that's fine. The line, of course, is that that's a thrown-away vote, even though I think Perot in his speech, it was pretty clever yesterday, said George Bush is saying a vote for Perot is throwing away a vote. Ross Perot says if a vote for George Bush is throwing away your vote. Does that concern you at all? Virtually nobody thinks he's going to win one state out of 50. Does that matter?
It doesn't, because the way I look at it, Bush is for the rich. If Clinton gets in, we'll have socialism for sure. And, I'm just...
Democratic Leadership Council, which was founded by Bill Clinton, is not only not a socialist organization, but many people, like me, by the way, consider it to be too moderate of an organization.
Paul, have you seen the flyer that was being passed out at the subways? Clinton's simplified 1040 form? Clinton's simplified 1040 form is, I will, I've got to read it, is how much do you make? Send it in.
Well, actually, I think there's also George Bush's simplified form, which we're going to be getting recently, say, do you make more than $200,000 a year? Don't send in anything.
Jim,
and you go back to Jerry Brown. I think he had a great idea with the 13% tax. That would eliminate the IRS.
And the flat tax, one of the worst ideas I've ever heard, but Paul, you're entitled.
Actually, it was a great idea, and I think people like that about
the flat tax,
Paul.
by the way, is generally believed that that was what cost Jerry Brown his momentum in New York State, and well, it should.
No, I think it was his rather quirky personality.
Maybe it was
an interesting idea, and it's certainly worth discussing. What we have now isn't working terribly well.
Serge from Cambridge, you're with us next on Talking New England. Welcome.
Hello, yes.
Hi.
How you doing?
Good, how are you?
Fine.
What's up?
As far as foreign policy goes, I don't think George Bush deserves any credit, because all the man has done is created monsters like Noriega and Saddam Hussein.
Well, they were there before George
Bush. He didn't create those people in the first place.
So you're basically saying
he's worry about them.
He's got the experience, but you don't like the experience, is the bottom line.
Exactly.
What do you think, Barbara? Propped up Noriega, propped up Hussein. Ronald Reagan, most people think, if from your point of view, this peace through strength was Ronald Reagan, not George Bush. What has George Bush done?
Well, the problem is that foreign policy is so complicated. Sometimes they end up supporting someone who's bad just to avoid supporting someone who's worse, and I think that's what happened in Iran, Iraq. Everyone forgets what Iran was to us. They were holding hostages. The Ayatollah Khomeini was absolutely nuts, and so they were supporting somebody to try to balance him. That's why it takes so much experience to do foreign policy, because it's extraordinarily complicated.
Do you realize, by the way, that a majority of people, I think it was in a Newsweek poll a few weeks ago, after 91% favored Bush and liked what happened in the war in January of a year ago, more than 50% now think the way he handled that war was not only inappropriate, but the ending, which they find to be unacceptable, was George Bush's fault.
If your side, the liberals, keep saying something over and over and over again, the press keeps repeating it over and over and over again, it starts to change public opinion. Like people now think Anita Hill was in the right, when in fact during the trial or during the hearing, people thought Anita Hill was lying. So I think you can start to see the pressure that public opinion is putting on people.
You support Clarence Thomas's nomination?
Oh, absolutely. I still think that Anita Hill was lying.
Most qualified justice in the United States?
I'm not listening to the media who's telling me that my personal judgment wasn't any good back then.
Was he the most qualified person to be on the Supreme Court in the United States?
Oh, I'm not sure what that means necessarily.
Was he qualified at all to be in the Supreme Court? I think it's one of those jobs you grow into once you... Of course he was qualified to be in the Supreme Court.
So
let me just be clear. If people now believe Anita Hill, and people now believe the war came out poorly, so people just don't understand what's going on, is that what you're saying?
If a black liberal were being nominated for the Supreme Court and anybody implied that he wasn't qualified, people would be screaming racism. But just because he was a conservative, and a conservative who didn't fall in with the liberal party line where blacks are supposed to be in the liberal party camp, that he was attacked by everybody.
Black, white,
and I think just
green,
the fact that he managed to get to... He wasn't incompetent. He's doing a fine job as Supreme Court Justice.
Fine job. On his way to taking away women's right to choose and virtually everything else progressive that's happened. But having said that, Chance from Quincy, you're with us on Talking to England. I can't believe that Barbara, by the way, is defending Clarence Thomas. Having said that, Chance, it's your time.
Okay.
Hi, how are you?
Okay, fine. How are you?
Good.
I wanted to go back to the question of taxes here in Massachusetts, and I really support Barbara and efforts of those that are interested in keeping the line. I personally make under $25,000 a year, trying to support a family. I think people between the ages of 20 and 35 especially are being decimated. That's why there's an emigration from this state to other states, particularly in the South and in the West. I myself personally want to stay in Massachusetts. If the taxes go up any further, to support people that are having large families, that aren't able to hold their own, we're going to have to move to Florida or someplace where there is no tax.
Chance, how do you feel
the
about...
cost of living is less.
How do you feel about, during the first 2 years of Bill Weld, the quality of services? For example, local aid to Quincy has been cut dramatically. Does that trouble you at all?
I'm not interested in services. I'm not interested in being a ward of the state, nor am I interested in fostering that kind of attitude.
Well, Chance, let me say, it's not, wait, you're not being a ward, wait, Chance, you're not being a ward of the state because you might like your neighborhood protector, you might like your kid well-educated. I don't consider that being a ward of the state.
State spending is up $1 billion this year. By the time the year is over,
under Bill Weld.
You can't have it both ways. You can't say all these services are being cut and spending is not. Spending is up $1 billion. By the end of the year, it'll be up $1.5 billion.
Local aid been cut over the first 2 years of Bill Weld, yes or no?
And whose fault is it? The fault was the Democratic legislature and Mike Dukakis, who brought us into a fiscal crisis where the only thing they could do was cut spending.
I think that people can balance their budgets. I think that the state of Massachusetts has to balance their budget.
Chance, let me tell you something. I agree with you, number one, but number two, I hope there is nobody, whether it's from Barbara Anderson's point of view or mine,
you and Barbara Gray don't believe in balanced budgets.
Believe in that in your income category, taxes should go up, and that's one of the reasons, by the way, that you'll see us, not on this show, but in some other forum, debating graduated income tax in the future.
I think there should be empowerment for people that are making less than $30,000 a year so that we can go out and afford to better ourselves. I can't afford a car at this time. There are people that are on public assistance that do have cars, that are getting much more of a free ride than they should. There needs to be more empowerment for people so that they can improve their lot, not just get a free ride.
Who are you, so to speak, free ride? It's a good line in that case. Who are you voting for president, by the way, Chance?
I'm going to vote for Bush. Clinton scares me.
And you're also, are you in the new district that includes Representative Studs in Quincy?
I believe so. Sure.
Are you voting for him, Brian the Independent, or the Republican?
Due to my religious beliefs, I'm going to have to vote against Studs.
You are. And so who are you going to vote for? Do you know yet?
Beg your pardon?
Who are you going to vote for? Do you know?
No, I'm not sure.
Okay.
Hey, you've got a whole day to make a decision. Don't let anybody push you. And don't forget, folks out there, if you vote for the senators, the Republicans who are running for Senate in the Quincy district, of course, it's Bob Hedlund, you've got Irv Wall, we've got Chris Lane, we've got Matt Amarello out in Worcester. These people have to be reelected in order to sustain the Weld's veto. We're going to have another tax increase,
stand
Chance.
for only one thing, namely re-election. Chance, thanks for being with us. Tom from Boston, you're with us on Talking New England. Welcome.
Yeah, good evening. Hi, Barbara. Hi, Jim.
Hi, Tom.
The reason that Bush is in trouble is because he spent too much money. Okay? When he went into office, he spent a lot of money on the social side and also the military side. People, the economy is down now because of it, and they're looking for a change.
Tom, you're not agreeing with Jim then that the reason some people are thinking of voting for Bill Clinton is so that they can see their taxes raised?
When Bill Clinton gets in there, he's going to spend more money.
Who are you voting for, Tom?
I'll probably end up voting for the Libertarian. I'm not cool with that guy neither. Mm-hmm. But what you're going to see is people are mad because the economy is stagnant. It's stagnant because Bush took a lot of money out of the private sector and put it into the public sector.
Did you vote for Bush 4 years ago?
No, I didn't. I voted for Ron Paul.
You did? Who was the Libertarian candidate then? So you basically don't believe in government to begin with.
No, it's not that I don't believe in government. I think the government, right now, the government on the federal level is taking 24% of the GNP. That's just too much money.
Tom, gotcha. You got your numbers, you got your Libertarian candidate, and we're going to have you back in a couple of
Libertarians are balanced to you. You want everything government, and Libertarians say very little government, and that creates a balance where most of us are in the middle.
We find you in the middle. In the middle of what? We'll find out when we come back in 2 minutes.
Leaning toward the Libertarian side, certainly not towards your side.
Make sure you stay with us to find out the answer to that question. Where is she on the political spectrum?
Welcome back to Talk of New England. I'm Barbara Anderson.
And I'm Jim Braude. And since we're in New England, the last state we're going to cover, sort of a little south of New England, New York State, and what most people consider to be the hottest, biggest spending, and probably the dirtiest campaign in America. Incumbent Al D'Amato, the Republican, against Bob Abrams, who won what most people believe to be the dirtiest, most bare-knuckled fight in the primary against Geraldine Ferraro and 2 other people. What's going to happen there, Barbara?
Well, Alphonse D'Amato is going to win because he's got the best slogan.
Which is?
In all the country this year. He has a slogan which refers to Robert Abrams, hopelessly liberal.
That's a good line.
Does that strike a chord with you, Jim?
That's a good line. I should say to you,
hopelessly liberal.
Both campaigns are despicable. I come from New York State, at least 15 years there. I know Bob Abrams, they say. I actually do. I think his campaign against Geraldine Ferraro was appalling. I think this campaign is equally appalling, but having said that, my guess is that Clinton's overwhelming win in New York is going to pull Abrams in, and D'Amato will have the short career he deserves.
Besides, you like Abrams because he, like you, is hopelessly hopelessly liberal.
Well, actually, he's a very honorable, good person who's lost his marbles in this election, and I hope he doesn't continue to lose them.
An
when he's in the
honorable, good
Senate.
person who's hopelessly liberal.
Back to Massachusetts very quickly. 4
Yes.
ballot questions. Number 1, 25-cent increase in the cigarette tax. We had them all here. To go into a health and education fund, what do you think is going to happen?
I hope voters are going to vote no.
What do you think is going to happen?
We were unable to get them to explain why 25 cents on a pack of cigarettes is going to stop anybody from smoking. We know the money isn't going to necessarily be spent on smoking programs. There's plenty of money already spent on smoking programs, and it's not making a difference. And besides, I hate the way they're attacking Jack Flood. If you have to make it a personal attack, the way they've made it a personal attack on Jack Flood, as if the AMA has never bought a politician, has never paid a lobbyist.
So we know how Barbara feels about that one.
Very
Question
strongly.
2, corporate tax reporting put on the ballot by my organization. While Bill Weld says it's moot, it's not moot. Not only are we asking for a yes vote, but the former chair of the No campaign, Paul Tsongas, I think you've heard of him, is asking us to join with team, vote yes to endorse the compromise. It's on the ballot tomorrow. Question 3.
In that case, let me say,
Yes.
vote no and make sure this thing is stopped before it turns the economy
We'll
even
be
worse
back in
than
2
it
years
is.
on the graduated income tax.
No on
Question
number
3,
2.
repackaging. The hottest in many ways, huge money, very close. Most of the polls show, there was a poll in the Middlesex News last week that showed it was the closest of all the ballot questions. What do you think happens there?
I received the mail-in piece and the vote
did
no
I.
committee, and it's the best I've ever seen. All they did was simply reproduce the entire bill, the law that they want to have passed, with a few little notations. Anybody reading that would have to vote no on
I received that, and I received the vote yes, which has Bill Weld on the cover and Joe Kennedy, his likely opponent in 1994,
So how are you voting
inside.
on question 3?
Question 4.
Question 3, how are you voting,
Question
Jim?
4.
Hey, I'm out here, I'm telling everybody I'm voting
She's
no,
an
no,
incredibly honest
no,
person.
no.
Question 4.
What does that make you? You're not going to tell them how you're going to
Toxic
vote on
tax,
question 3?
also sitting here. What do you think? Yes, no?
This is the one that has the League of Women Voters, the AFL-CIO, Citizens for Limited Taxation, all opposed.
Scary,
as far as I
isn't
know,
it?
there's almost nobody for it. How are you voting on question 4, Jim?
I think they all win. I think they all win fairly
Rowdy.
closely. Let me tell you what
People, they're holding their breaths out there, waiting to hear how you're going to
I don't
vote
want
on
to
these
prejudice
questions.
anybody's vote. I'm voting yes on 2. Vicki from Marblehead, you're with us on Talking New England. Welcome, and thanks for getting me out of this jam.
He's not out
How
of
are
this
you?
jam yet.
Hi,
Ask him how he's going to vote,
Hi,
Vicki.
Vicki.
Hi, I'm just a
For people that don't know, by the way, Barbara is from Marblehead, and so she's
Oh.
probably seen you somewhere in
maybe
shopping. Yeah, Vicki.
I just wanted to mention on CNN, Clinton is ahead by 7 points. I don't know what that means.
In the CNN poll where he was only 1 up a couple of days ago?
Yeah,
Really?
exactly. I guess the point that I was trying to make, that really a concern to me, I am a teacher. I don't want to get into salary, underpaid or not. I love what I do. Doesn't really, I'll be killed by unions, but I love what I do and it doesn't matter to me. But the major thing that I really find with Bush is the name calling, and that whole tactic of his. I listened to the first debate, and I couldn't help but sit here, teacher-like, I suppose, but sit here and make notes of, comments like one of these active groups, the nuclear freeze crowd, and then now calling people bozos and ozone man. And I work in I've been in many public schools because I teach special needs students, and I'm constantly shifted from school to school, and I do have an opportunity to look at the older grades, 4th and 5th, 6th grade, who put everything in ecology and do whole units on the energy and what's happening with the water. And to think that these children are sitting in classrooms hearing our leader of America calling people ozone man. I don't particularly like that.
Vicki, were you undecided? By the way, just you said that it has started in the first debate. Were you undecided before you heard that first debate?
I was really moved by what Clinton had to say during the Democratic convention.
All right,
but I didn't like Clinton. I still do not like Gore. I think he's a little headstrong on the environmental issues. However, I'm talking about what we're saying to the youth of America with name calling. We teach babies not to name call.
Vicki, were the children, do you think, watching, if they were watching the debates, do you think they were also watching the Democratic convention when this woman stood up with AIDS and accused President Reagan of being the person who caused her to have AIDS? I mean, do you think they're also seeing the Democrats coming up with these? Do you think they heard Jesse Jackson say that the Mother of God was a homeless, unwed mother? It's not as if it's just one side doing this. Politics is a dirty business. I'm sure you've heard that
Homeless,
phrase.
unwed
I know,
mother
but
is not
those
exactly
people are
an
not
attack.
running for president. I'm talking about someone who has been in the office, and not only has been in the office for 4 years, but has been under Reagan, who was just everybody emulated
Vicki,
for a long time.
very quickly, we just have another second. Which candidate do you think is better on issues of public education? Forgetting Perot just for a moment, my apology to the Perot files. Bush or Clinton? Who's got a better agenda?
At
At the moment, I'm hoping for Clinton because I'd like a whole restructuring of education. I'd like to see teachers, I'm a renegade, I'd like to see teachers work longer. I'd like to see children fed in the morning who don't have food in the house. And I'd like to see the schools utilized and custodians stay longer so schools could be open.
I'm not sure you're such a renegade. By the way, Vicki, I'm not sure you're such a renegade. I know quite a few of the people who run teachers unions, and I don't think they disagree with a lot of what you said.
And they don't. No, you're right. But I do mind that these children are hearing name calling.
Gotcha. Vicki, thanks for calling. We appreciate your call. Bill from Granby, you're with us next on Talking New England.
Hello there.
Hiya.
How you doing?
Good, how you?
I just wanted to say that I think most of the problem with our country right now is in the Congress and the Senate. The democratically controlled Congress and Senate has refused to give the president a line item veto.
People know that, just so it's clear, a line item veto, which they talk about so much in these debates, basically says, like essentially we have in Massachusetts, and I guess most states have, the overwhelm, that the President of the United States could, without vetoing the whole budget, take out specific lines of spending that he doesn't like.
The way the governors can. Governors like Bill Weld and Bill Clinton have had that ability.
And I believe Clinton, not only Bush, but Clinton supports that, doesn't he? Clinton wants
43 states have a line item veto.
But what I'm saying is Clinton supports it as well. Both candidates, both major party candidates support the line item veto.
You have to wonder why we don't have it then, don't you?
Yep.
I'm voting for Bush because Clinton just scares me with his policies.
Does Bush scare you at all?
Well, I don't agree with everything he has done. You can't agree with everything everybody does.
Do you agree with anything he's done on the economy?
Yeah, I think Bush is doing the right things. He's just been a very bad salesman.
Okay, but the problem is, we talked about 6 weeks ago, he's going to have an overwhelmingly Democratic Congress. Let's assume they're just as culpable as you say. If he couldn't deal with them for 4 years, why do you assume he's going to be able to deal with them for the next 4?
Because I'm scared what's going to happen if Clinton gets in there.
Gotcha, that's a fair point.
And those are our choices. Either,
and by the way, Jim,
yes.
If you ever run for public office, I hope you move to New York. You're far too liberal for me.
I thought you were going to say something nice, Bill, but thanks for calling anyway. Sam from Dedham, try to say something nicer about one of us, and welcome to Talking New England.
Hi, Sam.
Hi, Sam.
I just wanted to say that I'm a Clinton supporter. I hear people talk about George Bush and how great he's been for this nation. I remember 4 years ago when he stood up in front of us all and said, "Read my lips," and lied through his teeth. He's done nothing but lie, and I don't understand why people would trust him to not turn around again and raise taxes again.
Let me just say one last, believe it or not, I am strongly pro-Clinton, I am violently anti-Bush. I think the accusation that George Bush lied on this read my lips, first of all, it was ridiculous for him to say read my lips, but having said it, I don't think he lied. I think the reality is he decided for a variety of reasons a couple years later that the pledge was less important than trying to fix this budget. The problem I have is now trying to get out of this, blame this on Congress as if he wasn't a free agent, as if he didn't sign it himself. If he made a mistake, I credit him for having apologized for it, but this notion that the Congress made him do it is just ludicrous.
But you keep forgetting about people like Sam and people like me who are angry at Bush not because of spending cuts, but because he broke his no new tax pledge. And there are a lot of people out there who in the end will vote for President Bush simply because since he broke that pledge and learned his lesson from it, he probably won't.
Well, let's hear it, Barbara.
We know
Bush going to win, Bush going to lose. We're a couple of days away. What's going to happen?
I'm not sure. I think it's going to be very, very close. I think there's still a chance that people will vote for Bush just because they don't want the posters telling them who's going to win. But
did Democrats kill Bill Weld's veto in the Senate, state Senate?
I think the people in this state are going to have the good sense to keep the Senate Republicans in this so we can sustain the governor's veto and keep the Weld revolution alive.
Well, next week when you join us, you're going to find out all the answers. We will, of course, have George Bush and Bill Clinton with us on next week's show. You got me, don't you?
Stop telling people things that aren't true. You just can't.
We're going to have leaders of the Democrat and Republican Party to explain to you what happened and why, and then we're going to try to explain to you why we've been wrong on virtually all of our predictions. There are good reasons
for it. Except, of course, for the ballot question when Jim hasn't taken a stand.
We'll tell you next week what my position is on the ballot question. Thanks for being with us this week. Make sure you vote on Tuesday.
Then you say you knew.
Join us again next Sunday.
Your side won.